Members, I believe that without these changes, the amendment being considered is overly broad and ambiguous. I'm concerned that we may be unintentionally providing cover for perpetrators of crimes when I know Senator Garcia's intent is to save lives and protect women. It's the intent of this body to always do what's right and show compassion. This amendment makes sure that we're taking steps to stop abuse to women and never enabling it. Members, without these changes, I would encourage you to vote against Senator Garcia's amendment to the bill.
Senator Watson, is your light on? For what purpose?
I'd like to ask a question of Senator Campbell, the author of the amendment to the amendment.
Do you yield, Senator?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator Campbell, and I understand what you say when you lay this out, but would you agree with me that there are instances where a woman could be raped and because she fears for her life otherwise would not want to report that to law enforcement officials? Can you conceive of that situation?
Yes.
And so what happens there is that a young woman, say the young woman I used in my hypothetical yesterday, who her goal in life had been that she would not engage in any sexual activity or intercourse until after she were married, but she ends up being raped. She finds that she's pregnant, and she's been raped. She's been through that trauma. She now faces a situation where she fears that there would be retaliation if she were to report it. She has to deal with that. And then under Senator Taylor's legislation, she would be unable to get insurance coverage because of all of those circumstances. You can, when you talk in terms of compassion, you can have compassion for that situation, can't you?
Yes, but I can tell you it's a slippery slope if we get outside the box of what this bill is. This bill is an insurance bill, looking at what insurance should be responsible to pay for. And that's where I think we need to lead the discussion.
Well, while I agree with you that this is an insurance bill, this is first and foremost and fundamentally an insurance bill that denies insurance coverage for women that may need to have a termination of a pregnancy in cases of rape, in cases of incest. And because we just call it an insurance bill, we shouldn't just use the label of an insurance bill to reduce the compassion you speak of and not think through the practical effect of this bill. So let's have another situation. If a young woman were the victim of incest, let's say a family member molests this woman and she becomes pregnant, can you see where she might not want to report that to law enforcement officials because of the fear of retaliation? And now you've put her in a situation where she would not have coverage should she decide to terminate that pregnancy.
So let me ask you a question. Are you saying that
I'd appreciate an answer to mine, and then I'll be happy to answer a question.
I think that I need some clarification from you, and that would come from a question. Are you really asking that instead of encouraging that hypothetical situation from moving into a protection for her by law enforcement, we're saying let's cover that violation with an insurance payment when she gets the abortion? I would question are we empowering the perpetrator because now, out of a coercion, her fear that she gets an abortion, it's paid for by an insurance company, and then it may happen to her again. And so that's the framework I'm looking at. This is talking about an insurance policy. I do agree that we can look at when it's something that's measurable within the box, that when it's reported to law enforcement authorities, then we have something measurable that insurance companies who like to, have specific codes, and that they then have something they can hang their hat on.
Senator,
but I think otherwise it's too
I'm not
broad.
sure I heard the question in there, but I'd like to answer. I'm not sure what your question was, but here's an answer, or here's a comment on your statement.
Sure.
I don't think, following the use of your language when you laid out your amendment to the amendment, of trying to show compassion, I don't think that what we should do is pass a piece of legislation and your amendment to the amendment and put the burden on the incest victim or put the burden on the rape victim with regard to whether or not there's some sort of empowerment under your scenario. I think what we ought to do is we ought to be working to try to make sure that that young woman that is the victim of incest, that young woman that is the victim of rape, has the ability to make some choices, and we ought to let her make those decisions, as opposed to you and me right now on this floor trying to come up with a scenario where we're worried about what we might do with the perpetrator. The perpetrator's bad. We all know that. Mm-hmm. But the situation that the young woman finds herself in is also very bad and horrible, and we're going to make that worse. I think what we ought to do is we ought to trust women who might find themselves in this situation to make the decisions that are in their best interest instead of the scenario that you tried to outline.
I appreciate your comment.
Senator, if you put this onto this amendment, what you will be doing is you will be creating a situation where women who are already victims will be further victimized. I would ask that you not do this, that you instead trust women enough to make the decisions that will be in their best interest, particularly when they're in situations where they have been victimized.
Thank you for your comments. But the other side, where I am coming from, is that I feel we are helping to stop a perpetrator by reporting the assault, the incest, and I believe if we broaden this amendment as it is now, Senator Garcia's amendment, we lose the opportunity to help protect and defend the woman who is the victim here. So again, I'm not going to budge on the fact that I believe we need to strike out the part that is overly broad and ambiguous. And I believe that my amendment to this amendment does what's right, does show compassion, and it takes steps to stop abuse to women and not enable it by covering them with an insurance policy.
Well, once again, what I would suggest to you, Senator, is that what you are doing is you are putting your judgment and placing an additional burden on a victim. And I think that is an inappropriate role for us to play, that instead we ought to trust that woman under those circumstances to make the difficult decision she's going to have to make and not add an additional burden. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator.
I have a couple of questions for the author of the amendment to my amendment.
One moment.
Thank you.
Mr. President, at this time, I'll withdraw my amendment.
Okay. Members, the amendment to the amendment is withdrawn. So, Senator Garcia, you have laid out your amendment.
Can I close on my amendment, sir? Or is he going to accept it as he said he would yesterday?
I do not speak for the senator, but you have laid out your amendment, and now Senator Taylor can address your amendment, and then you'll have a chance to close.
Thank you, Mr. President.
You want to ask her questions? You want to ask her questions?
May I ask a question of Senator Garcia?
Yes.
Senator Garcia, when the first portion of the amendment where it talks about because of a woman's pregnancy as a result of a sexual assault, incest or other violation of the penal code has been reported to the authorities, I think that is a measurable thing because you can see the report, and an effort has been made to try to find the perpetrator or define there was a perpetrator. I feel that the language outside of that is very broad and not measurable. With insurance companies, you know, we're looking here at an insurance company trying to pay for an abortion. Essentially, you know, it's just a broader language there. Do you not feel that that's a little too broad, or what part of the first part of that is not enough?
Well, Senator, I think it sort of goes back to what Senator Watson said in your dialogue with him. I mean, this, again, is not my language. It's straight out of the Safe and Healthy Code. It's already law. I was not here in 2011 when that debate happened, so I'm not sure exactly why they put it. But basically, it recognizes that there are many times, in fact, I am told by the Texas Association of Against Domestic Violence, TASA, that 91% of sexual assaults are not reported. And they're usually not reported because of the emotional trauma associated, about the shame of the situation, because they fear further bodily injury or harm. There's a lot of reasons. So we can't sit here and second guess why a woman may or may not report it. In fact, you may have read in the news recently that there's been a national concern about the rampant rage of sexual assault in campuses. And one of the things they found out is that they're not reporting because there's fear, there's retaliation. There's a lot of reasons, but the bottom line is that we have to recognize that that is reality, and that we have to trust and respect women to do the right thing. So this was included, I'm guessing then. I don't know. I wasn't there in 2011. But I think it suits, it's worked, and it suits us fine, and that's why we included the language.
I most certainly am happy to work with you on bills that we can legislate to try to help women have cover so that they can report things with less threat, if you will, and more anonymity. So I'm happy to work with you on that. Again, personally, I believe that if we're asking an insurance company to pay for an abortion, we should also show that we're doing everything we can to help them in the cases of sexual assault or incest, that we're doing everything we can to help find the perpetrator.
Well, you know,
this,
I'm glad you mentioned this is an insurance bill, and that's what it is.
It is insurance
And as you
bill.
know, in an insurance claim, you know, the adjuster doesn't just march in there and write you a check. They will do some background checks. They will do some checking. So I'm sure they'll do their due diligence. And I think that the claims will either be paid or not paid. But that's something that we have to leave in the hands of the adjuster. And the author of the bill could probably help us more on that because he's in the business himself. Okay. But again, this is language. It's already in the Health and Safety Code. It was adopted in 2011. It's existing language. And that's the reason that we selected this language.
Okay. Well, I think we are both definitely on the same page about compassion for women and their protection, and so I appreciate
We
it.
need
your
to
comments.
trust women, and
Thank
we
you.
need to respect their judgment and not second guess them and put ours in their place.
Senator
you.
Hoffman, for what
Thank you.
purpose?